The Legislature Today is on the air from our flagship affiliate, the voice of the Northern Plains 550 Cape Fire, and affiliates Talk Radio AM 1100 The Flag Fargo and Talk Radio 1090 The Flag in the Bakken. We're broadcasting live from the historic Peacock Alley American Grill and Bar in downtown Bismarck, the National Cattlemen's Association Beef Innovator of the Year. You're about to find out what's happening in the North Dakota legislative session. Your host of the Legislature Today is Dale Wetzel, managing editor of Great Plains News and the Great Plains Examiner. If you have questions or comments or to watch the show, go to GreatPlainsNews.com. GreatPlainsNews.com. The Legislature Today is brought to you by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties, the Credit Union Association of the Dakotas, the University of Mary, the North Dakota Corn, Soybean and Grain Growers Association, and the North Dakota Ethanol Council, the Northwest Landowners Association, Touchstone Energy Cooperative, North Dakota Rural Electric Cooperatives Association, and members Minnesota Power and Great River Energy, the North Dakota chapter of Concerned Women for America, the Expressway Inn and Suites, where a good night's rest costs less, and the Peacock Alley. It's time to get started. Another hour of the Legislature Today is on the air.
This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program. In fact, it's the last one we will be broadcasting this session from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota, because we do not have a show from the Peacock Alley on Friday nights, and the legislature is supposed to end Friday night. I say supposed to because there are 80 days in a session, at no more than 80 days in a session every 2 years. Based upon the North Dakota Constitution, that is the constitutional limit to the number of days that the legislature may meet every 2 years. And tomorrow is day 80. May 3rd is the 80th day of the North Dakota legislature. It does look as if they will be able to finish. It will be probably in the late afternoon or early evening because they've got some substantial bills left to do. There's some policy differences that still remain to be worked out, but it just takes time to assemble bills for their final votes in the House and Senate, and there are 8 left. There's the Department of Public Instruction budget. There's the Office of Management and Budget, which also tracks any number of last-minute amendments from legislators. There's a proposal to it's a proposal to give folks a income tax credit on their property tax bills. There's a legislative study of property tax growth. There's the higher education spending bill, and also the another bill that dictates how higher education will receive its state aid, how it will be distributed amongst the North Dakota University System schools. There's 11 of them. There's the highway patrol budget bill, and there's a bill dealing with the electric distribution tax. So we do have some work left to do in the legislature, and tomorrow, as I said, is day 80. Tonight is what is called the Sine Die Party, and most of the legislators are there right now. Actually, I shouldn't say that because the Senate is actually meeting right now. It's supposed to be meeting at 7 p.m. to vote on a couple of bills, but I imagine that the Sine Die Party within an hour will be in full swing, and so we're grateful to our guests this evening, especially because they're taking some time away from an excellent soiree to speak with us here on the radio. And we have for our first half hour on the Legislature Today radio program, we have Secretary of State Al Jaeger. And Mr. Jaeger has an extensive roster of interests in the North Dakota legislature. We're going to be talking to him about voter identification first and foremost. Welcome, Al.
Thank you for having me, Dale.
How would you compare this session to the others that you've seen? You've been the Secretary of State for 20 years now.
This is my 11th session.
Yes.
Well, they're all, very, very busy, very intense, and fortunately over the years, the many different things that impact our office, we've had very good success in the legislature, and we're very grateful for the support that we've received. But we work very hard to prepare well and make sure that legislators are very well aware of the needs that we have in our office and many of the pieces that we have to better not only business in North Dakota, because that's part of my function, and elections in North Dakota, and even my role as the Commissioner of Combative Sports.
Yes.
We sometimes have bills with that too.
Yes, you're not the combative sports commissioner. You're the commissioner of combative sports. What can you just tell me generally? What sort of bills normally come down the pike for you during a legislative session?
Well, my office has many different duties. So, like on one side, we had a notary bill. We had a bill related to Uniform Commercial Code, secured transactions. We had some fine-tuning with some corporate bills. On the election side, actually there were approximately 36 bills introduced that were election-related. 18 of those were defeated, and 18 of them passed. And of those 18 that passed, pretty much every one of them, our office had some involvement in those bills. We were asked to make them better. A few of them were introduced on our behalf, and I'm pleased with the results that we had out of that group of bills that did pass.
One of the bills in particular was of interest to one of my co-hosts, Gary Emineth, who is not here this evening. It had to do with where you could campaign, when you can campaign on Election Day, and where you could campaign.
That's right.
Could you tell us about that? How that changed?
Well, essentially, because of the decision that was made in the federal district court that our long-standing electioneering law was unconstitutional, which basically said that on Election Day you couldn't campaign, you couldn't electioneer. And I think during the entire 11 sessions that I've been around, it's been pretty much acknowledged that it's unconstitutional, but nobody ever wanted to change it, because I think there was some that really liked the fact that on Election Day it was done, and the signs were down, and everything was pretty well cleaned up. Essentially, the change that was made, and this was done in cooperation with the prevailing side in that decision, that the bill was changed, but there is a setback. So electioneering cannot be conducted within 100 feet of the entrance to a polling location. And that standard is used according to a survey by the National Association of Secretary of States, in probably about half of the states. And so it's a standard that will hold up constitutional muster. So at least people will be able to walk into a polling location and not be confronted by anybody campaigning.
Do you think that's a reasonable standard, 100 feet from a polling place?
Yes, it is.
Another bill that involves the Secretary of State's office that got quite a bit of attention was voter identification. And this has been passed by the House and Senate and signed by the governor. And it says that if you go to vote, you need identification that shows where you live and your date of birth. And could you tell us about why you thought that law was necessary?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out that in the 2003 session, a law was passed that did require voter identification. And so it's really always been a part of our law since 2003. However, there was one exception. That is, if you did come without the proper identification, you could sign a voter's affidavit. And that voter's affidavit, on it, you essentially indicated that information. The problem that started coming up is that when you execute a voter's affidavit, that ballot is mixed in with everybody else. And if after the election the voter is found out to be not eligible, there's no way that can be retrieved. And so there's been several efforts in the last 2 or 3 sessions where they wanted to set them aside. But every one of those particular efforts really it became a very cumbersome process. Voters would have to come back and do whatever. And we just said, well, if they're going to need identification and it's part of the law anyway, maybe it should just be for everybody up front. This last election in November, we had over 10,000 people that executed a voter's affidavit. That was up from about 4,000 4 years ago. And so there's just been a huge increase. And then after the election, the auditors are supposed to send out postcards to verify that these were legitimate. And in this last election, we had approximately around 400 postcards that came back undeliverable. Now, there could have been a variety of reasons. And there was just always this cloud over the fact of these voter affidavits. I think the bill has been misrepresented a lot by some people. It's been represented as disenfranchising people. And you know what, I check electionline.org every day, and there's identification bills being passed throughout the country, and many of them much more strict than ours, requiring, for instance, photo ID. This doesn't require photo identification. And we're going to be working with everybody. We have a plan already in place. So we're working with the universities to make sure that, you know, if anybody wants to vote and they're a qualified elector, they're going to be able to vote. And so I think it's very good. It removes the cloud that hung over voter affidavits, where so many people showed up and they didn't have any type of identification. And in this day and age, this very important right, it just seems that the least that you can do is provide identification. You need it to get it on to go on an airplane. You need it for so many things. And of all things that's so important in voting and the integrity of the vote, it should be okay.
What sort of issues is this law going to create that you know already that you're going to have to solve?
Well, I think the main thing is education, but we've already had education for these last many election cycles where we've encouraged people to bring voter identification. So we'll just make that, concentrate on that more. I think we can easily work with the groups, every type of group that there might be. You know, there was concern about senior citizens, and yet we know that, over all this time, they were coming with identification. Many of them vote absentee already. There was things that were inserted into that bill to even make it easier for those type of people to vote with the absentee voting. And so mostly what we see, it's a matter of education. A big block of voters, of course, would be college students. And college students, they really need to make a decision. If they come from out of state, they have to make a choice. Are they going to vote back home or are they going to vote here? And so, they would come to the polls and, they'd have identification and it wouldn't match up with certain things, and they'd execute an affidavit and would be allowed to vote. So we'll really be concentrating on college students.
Why not a photo ID? Is that something that you consciously decided not to seek?
Well, actually, what was interesting, we didn't suggest it, and the legislators themselves very much wanted to make it very clear that a photo ID was not a requirement. They did not want to pursue that issue. They did not want to do anything, and of course, in other states, there's many other states that where that's been pursued, but the legislative body itself did not want to require a photo ID, and we certainly didn't recommend it because we feel that there's many types of identification that can be used that don't require photo ID.
One question I got a lot about this bill is, what problem does it solve?
I think basically what it solves is that there was over 10,000 people that came to the polls that did not have identification, that executed an affidavit and were allowed to vote. And in some of those cases, it's quite probable that some of those people were not qualified electors. Now, whether that's true or not, or whether there was a problem or not, the fact is that when the auditors did their follow-up, some of that follow-up came back as undeliverable. It was not a very good sign. So I think it eliminates a situation, regardless of which side of the vote that you're on. It eliminates that question. Well, gee, all of these voters came and didn't have identification, and their ballots were mixed in with everybody else. That's what it solves.
Well, I was just wondering if you could isn't it possible to show up with a perfectly good, accurate ID and still be ineligible to vote?
That is possible, but I think that anything is possible with elections. But we have a very good history in the state, and the fact that we do not have voter affidavits, this has been a concern for a number of election cycles. And I think we finally, with the passage of this bill, have eliminated one area of concern. And so the argument that, no, we haven't had a problem, the Secretary of State has said that there was no voter fraud, it was still these 10,000 plus voters that voted and did not have identification.
What sorts of ID are you going to be accepting besides, say, for example, I mean, the legislation refers to a North Dakota driver's license, a valid license, and also a non-driver photo ID by the Department of Transportation. But are there going to be other types of identification that are going to be suitable?
Yes, we already have worked with the university system where they will be able to provide methods of identification that provide the essential elements that a student will be able to use. So it won't necessarily require a changing of their driver's license and other things. So there will be many different ways that we will approach this.
I mean, there are some state IDs that are not driver's licenses, but are photo IDs and have a birth date and an address. And I'm thinking of a concealed carry permit. Would that be a suitable identification?
I can't say for sure. We haven't pursued that yet. But the bottom line is that we will do everything possible to make sure that every eligible voter who wants to vote will be able to have the identification that they need. And
this is probably an unusual situation, but I was going through my own photo ID. I mean, I have a passport, I have a passport card. Neither of those things would suffice because they don't have my address on them. Mm-hmm. And if for example, if I only had a passport or a passport card and I didn't have anything with my address on it, even though I have something that says that I am a citizen and it has my birth date on it, what could I do to cure the fact that I don't have something with my address on it?
Well, we need to have something that connects all of the information because, to be an eligible voter in North Dakota, you need to have resided in a precinct for 30 days. And so somehow we need to have identification that shows that you have, in fact, lived in the precinct for 30 days prior to the election.
Is this something that you're going to be doing through administrative rules, or by what process are you going to use?
Well, actually, there's language in the bill that allows me to do that, and my election team has already been working on many different options. I know that we'll be touching base with a lot of organizations.
How do you see that going forward? Are you going to have public hearings, or what's going to happen?
Well, I don't think we need public hearings. We'll just develop the methods that are needed and make sure that we have a very good education effort. And again, when people say this is something new, it isn't. Voter identification has been required since 2003. The only thing that this bill changes is it eliminates the voter's affidavit. So it hasn't established anything that didn't exist before. It just eliminated an option.
Okay. And how do you think that this will make the job of election administrators easier?
Well, I think for the the poll workers, it'll make their job a lot easier because it takes away an element that they had to deal with before with the execution of the 10,000 voter affidavits. That was quite a challenge for county auditors, poll workers to deal with it. And when you have a county like Cass County, where there were many of them, the workload that is involved in the follow-up is immense. And so really from the standpoint of county election officials and poll workers, it'll make their job a lot easier. And of course, if it's easier, they can concentrate on the things that are important and really continue to uphold our elections. The Pew Trust, in 2010, their study indicates that North Dakota was #1 in the nation in terms of election administration. And everything that's passed this session is just going to increase a good track record that we already have.
What did the legislature do this session, if it did anything, that makes it easier to vote?
Well, I guess I can't say that there was anything specific because we've had so many provisions in the law already for several years. I mean, we have the fact that we have voting centers. We have absentee ballots that you don't need a reason for. There's so many different options that we already have. So I'd have to say, Dale, that in this session, I don't know that we really added anything in that category because we've already had it for a number of election cycles.
Where do you see the trends going? I mean, there's a number, or there's a few jurisdictions that have voting centers, which you mentioned. First of all, can you tell us what a voting center is?
Essentially, under law, that so many days prior to the election, people can come to the voting center, regardless of where they live in a county, and they're able to vote there. And they come in with their identification, again, as it's been required since 2003, and they show it. The information, a lot of the counties have now electronic poll books. It immediately identifies the correct ballot. They go to the election judge. They receive the ballot for their residency, regardless of where they are in a county, and it works works very, very well. And it's proven to be very popular in the counties that have used it. Right off the top of my head, I can't remember quite the percentage, but combination of early voting centers, absentee balloting, voting by mail. If memory serves me correct, it was somewhat over 30% of the vote was cast prior to the election last November.
I was thinking about, we talked about voting centers, and do you see, like in the future, someone being able to vote outside their home county, if that's convenient for them?
Well, actually they can now in the sense that they can vote absentee.
Okay.
So, I mean, they do have options available for them.
I was thinking about someone who walks into the voting center in Stutzman County, for example, and that person lives in Cass County, but maybe they're out in Jamestown on a job.
Well, that I think the only thing that would happen there, that would be in the some type of future electronic age, and whether we're going to be able to get to that in the next several years, I don't know.
I've heard some people say it is too easy to vote, that you should have to trek down to the polling place on Election Day and cast your ballot. What do you think about that?
Well, there are people that feel that if you're going to vote, that's there should be something involved. I think over the years the legislature has passed laws that provide a lot of options, and that's why when I hear people say things about the voting process, and I just have to wonder, well, if you really want to vote, there's about 4 or 5 different options that you have, and we almost carry the ballots out to the people. So how far do you go? I mean, there has to be something. The voter themselves has to have the motivation to cast a ballot.
We've been talking to Secretary of State Al Jaeger about voter identification and other subjects. Thank you for your time, Secretary Jaeger. This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program, and we'll be back in a moment.
Hi, this is Mike Reagan.